Welcome back, Sebastian here. Time for my season review of Season 10 of Formula E. So, second season of the Gen 3 rules. Arguably a pretty successful season, but that being said, I think in contrast to Season 9, I think the racing itself was a little bit worse. A lot of Peloton racing, something that I know a lot of people don't like. But in this video today, I'm going to be focusing on teammates and teammate head-to-head matchups, looking at lots and lots of different types of data. And then we're also going to do a look at teams as well to kind of see how they did compared to Season 9 as well as Season 8 a bit later. So starting, going in teams championship order, I'll explain all these stats as we go along, but starting with Jaguar, of course their two drivers were the two Kiwi drivers on the grid, Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy. Overall, pretty successful season. They won the team's championship, Mitch Evans finishing second in the drivers, and Nick Cassidy finishing third. Starting with qualifying, they're qualifying head-to-head in the group stage of qualifying, adjusted for which group they were in, 8 apiece, so basically dead even in qualifying. The median qualifying delta though, Nick Cassidy held a slight advantage, 0.01 seconds, so about 1/100th of a second. However, interestingly, when you look at average starting position, Evans definitely had the edge there. 5.8 for Evans, 7.6 for Cassidy, suggesting that when Evans outqualified Cassidy, Cassidy was having a much worse time of it, starting much further down the grid. When we look at average finishing position though, very, very close, 5.1 for Evans, for Cassidy, 5.3. So Cassidy making a lot more progress relative to his starting position. But then when you look at the points, 192 for Evans, and for Cassidy, 176. So very, very close there. And again, if Cassidy was starting where Evans was, would he get more points? Maybe. Would he be champion? Also a maybe. When you look at podiums, 6 for Evans, 8 for Cassidy, pretty close there, but Cassidy does come out on top. They're tied on wins, 2 apiece there. And when I put all this data into the race data model for Formula E, it comes out with a positive 0.24 for Evans, suggesting that Evans was the slightly better driver over the course of the season. But that 10th rank shows that out of all the teammate gaps, it was the 10th biggest. So basically, second smallest gap between teammates, which I think is pretty much accurate. And again, this is also a Z-score, so it's also about it's a Z-score, but because of how I calculate it, it's about the same as 2 standard deviations. So a score of 2 would actually equal 1 standard deviation. Now, looking at average power rankings, for this, Cassidy was a slightly better driver, 6.7 was his average score, and that ranked 3rd on the grid. For Evans, his was 7.4, which ranked 4th. So still, both drivers very, very good this season. And again, I felt that, just looking at that one particular number, it seems like I thought Cassidy had a slightly better year. Now, last one, looking at points above expected. For Evans, 102%. So he's scoring more points than expected based on the strength of the car and based on his starting position. For Cassidy, 113%. So suggesting that Cassidy's getting a little bit more out of the car in the races. Overall for Jaguar, pretty solid year for the two of them. I do think that, while the points would say that Evans had the better year, I think basically going all the way up to Portland, Cassidy was the better driver, and it was just that he had such a torrid run at the end of the season. Of course, he did spin on the final lap of Portland. That was definitely a massive mistake on his part. That second race, though, kind of got taken out. Again, bad qualifying first race in London, and then the final race of the season got taken out. So perhaps a little bit unlucky as well for Cassidy. Now, moving on to Porsche, second in the team's championship, and of course, the team of the drivers' champion, Pascal Wehrlein, of course, winning the championship. His teammate, Antonio Felix Costa, a bit of a comeback towards the second half of the season. He finished 6th in the championship. I think, for Porsche, their data is quite interesting. When you look at all the pieces together, it really paints a picture of Da Costa being a fantastic racer in the races, but just the qualifying lets him down so much. So, qualifying head-to-head in the groups, 12-4 in favor of Wehrlein, median qualifying delta 0.13 seconds. So just over a 10th of a second, which, in Formula 1 terms, just as a relative comparison, 10th of a second wouldn't be too bad. But in Formula E, you see that all of the teammate gaps for median qualifying delta are below 210. So relatively speaking, it's actually quite big. And when you look at average finishing position for Wehrlein, 5.1, for DaCosta, 10.5. So DaCosta is starting on average 5 positions further back than Wehrlein, and yeah, that's a massive hole to climb out of every single race. And it's something that really, I think you could make a really good argument, cost him any chance of fighting for that driver's title this year. Average finishing position, 5.9 for Wehrlein, for DaCosta, 8.1. So Wehrlein actually going backwards from his starting position, but he did have a couple outliers there that definitely dragged that number down. Points, 198 for Wehrlein, of course, Formula E champion. For DaCosta, 134. So again, still quite a ways off Wehrlein, but definitely I think an improvement from last year. Now, podiums and wins, this is a bit interesting. So for Wehrlein, 5 podiums, 3 wins. For DaCosta, 4 podiums, all of them wins. And DaCosta actually has the most wins of anyone this season, winning a quarter of the E-Prix this year. He of course won, which ones did he win? Let's see if I can get this right. So he got a win in Berlin, win in Shanghai, and then both wins in Portland on top of the one in Misano. And really the common denominator across all of those tracks was that qualifying wasn't that important, and it was pretty easy to overtake, and it was very much a strategic peloton race. And again, it seemed like DaCosta really thrived in that kind of racing. Tight, twisty circuits where qualifying was very important. Tokyo, actually Tokyo he did pretty well, but Mexico, Diriyah, London didn't do so well there. Really kind of highlighting where DaCosta's really struggled in the Gen 3 rules. Points model, 1.35 was that score in favor of Wehrlein, which ranked 6. So again, somewhere towards the middle. Average power rankings, 4.9 for Wehrlein, 8.9 for DaCosta. So for Wehrlein, that ranked second best, and for DaCosta, that ranked 8th best on the grid among the full-time drivers. Points above expected, 106 for Wehrlein, and for DaCosta, 120. So very, very good in that respect for DaCosta, really showing that he's doing better than expected, better than average in the races, suggesting that his ability to save energy, ability to overtake, his racecraft, all very, very good. It was really just the qualifying that hurt him a lot. Now, moving on to number 3 in the championship, DS Penske. We have the championship duo Jean-Eric Vergne and Stoffel Vandoorne. For Jev, pretty good season, 5th in the championship this year, and for Stoffel Vandoorne, only 10th. For Jev, he did win the qualifying head-to-head this year after tying last year with Vandoorne, so wins 10-6. Median qualifying delta 0.035 seconds, so not terrible in that respect, but still pretty close. Average starting position for Vergne, 5.8, for Vandoorne, 8.8. So it really felt like, even though the data here for the qualifying head-to-head in the group stage was pretty close, it felt that when you got to the 350% laps, or kilowatt-hour laps, it really felt like Jev was much, much stronger there. And he would get into the semifinals, start top 4, whereas Vandoorne was often out in that quarter final. Average finishing position, 6.7 for Vergne, 9.4 for Vandoorne. So both of them going backwards from their starting position. And both of them are champions, both of them are very, very good drivers, so it really suggests they're both pretty good qualifiers, and the efficiency of that DS powertrain is simply not there. And when we get to the data on the far right, the points above expected, that kind of bears itself out as well. When you look at points overall though, 139 for Vergne, 61 for Vandoorne. No wins this season for DS Penske, but 3 podiums for Vergne and only 1 for Vandoorne, which of course was at Monaco. Points, the points model score 1.65 for Vergne, which ranks 5th, so a slightly bigger gap compared to the Porsche duo. Average power rankings for the two of them, 7.7 for Vergne, which ranked 5th, and 13.4 for Vandoorne, so a little bit below average. And then, of course, I've talked about how Vergne had a pretty good season. You would think that this points above expected would be above 100%, but actually no, it's 83%. For Vandoorne, it's pretty poor, 52%, the first one that we've seen so far. Below 100, or the first 2 below 100 that we've seen. And I think it's whenever you see this situation where both drivers in a team are below 100%, either it means they're both pretty poor drivers and they're very inconsistent, or the race pace, and I guess in this case the efficiency, there's a large gap between that and where they're starting, on the grid. So that unfortunately means that they're just kind of chronically going to be stuck below, even though, in theory the model is supposed to correct for that, which of course is something that's kind of a bit of a weakness of it. Now, moving into fourth, one of the biggest improvers from season 9 is Nissan. Their two drivers this year, Oliver Rowland and Sasha Fenestraz. Rowland, of course, brought back to the team after his brief half season at Mahindra, and basically a revelation this year, arguably one of the best drivers this season. Now, of course, Rowland did miss 2 races, the 2 races in Portland, so the data from that race is excluded, and that's just how I do it, because again, I'm prioritizing comparing the teammates against each other, and if one driver's done more races than the other, then it's kind of unfair to the other one. So for Rowland, he out-qualified Fenestraz 12-2 over the course of the season, median qualifying delta 0.123 seconds. So again, another driver who's over a tenth of a second, so pretty big in Formula E terms. Average starting position 9.6 for Rowland, 14.4 for Fenestraz. So really big difference there. And I think a really big surprise given how strong Fenestraz was in qualifying last year, taking pole positions, and then he goes to basically being massively out-qualified by his teammate Rowland, who again, also another driver who has a reputation for being a very strong qualifier, but still something that was pretty unexpected going into the season. Average finishing position 5.8 for Rowland, 10.4 for Fenestraz. So both of them making up positions, but because they're starting so far apart from one another, it has a massive difference on the points that they're able to accumulate. So for Rowland, 156 points over the course of the season. For Fenestraz, only 26 points. For Rowland, 7 podiums, 2 wins. Of course, one of those came thanks to DaCosta's disqualification, but still, a win is a win. And for Fenestraz, no podiums, no wins. Let's see, points model score 2.91. So that's the second biggest gap between teammates across the entire season 10 grid. Average power rankings 4.9 for Rowland, which actually ranked first. I was a bit surprised that he ended up ahead of all of the Jaguars and Porsches, but I did think he had a very, very good year, and he didn't really have any races where he was exceptionally poor, like some of the other ones did, which dropped their scores. For Fenestraz, 15.7, which ranked 20th, so third worst on the grid for Fenestraz. And again, I do think there's a lot of questions about will he be on the grid next year. Of course, again, is not signed to a contract yet for season 11. For expected points model, this is where things kind of get a bit crazy. So for Rowland, 153%, so he scored 1.5 times the points that he was expected to score based on where he was starting. So very, very good in the races of maximizing points. For Fenestraz, only 52%, so about half the points he was expected to get. So for Andretti, tough season. Of course, won Drivers' Championship last year with Jake Dennis. And again, when we talk about the teams at the end, although this video is already at 13 minutes, that might take a while. We'll see that there's one of the big trends from season 9 to season 10 is about how much customer teams struggled. But for Jake Dennis, again, the lead Andretti driver, finished 7th in the championship. New teammate Norman Nato in 15th. Now qualifying, probably a lot closer than many would have thought. And this was actually a qualifying battle where over the course of the season, for whatever reason, Dennis just got worse and Nato started out-qualifying him with much more regularity. But at the end of the day, it was 10-6 with Dennis median qualifying delta of 0.023 seconds, which again, almost nothing. Average starting position 12.3 seconds, 12.3 for Dennis, 12.6 for Nato. But for Dennis, making up a lot of positions in those races, 7.6 was his average finishing position compared to Nato's 11.5. Points at the end of the season, 122 for Dennis, 47 for Nato. And for Dennis, 4 podiums, 1 win. I believe that came in Diriyah. And for Nato, that 1 podium, courtesy of that really good race in Shanghai. For the points model score, for Dennis, a plus 2.04. Which ranked 4th, so 4th biggest gap between teammates this year. So again, that's about one standard deviation. So again, bigger than about 63% of Formula E teammate head-to-heads. Average power rankings for Dennis 8.7, which ranked 6th overall, and for Nato a 14.0, which ranked 17th. Does seem a bit low for Nato, but there were a ton of drivers who were basically between an average of 12 and an average of 14. So again, very, very close on that score. But when they're ranked, some of them have to be kind of low. For points above expected, Dennis 206%. So again, double the points that he would be expected to score based on how low he was starting on the grid. And for Nato, 86%. So still not quite 100, but not an abysmal number either. For Envision, a bit of a really trucky year, similar to Andretti. There are two drivers, Fines and Buemi. Fines 9th in the championship and Buemi in 11th. Of course, this duo missed the Berlin round entirely, but it was both of them, so it doesn't really affect teammate head-to-head too much. For Fines, 12 points, or not for 12 points, out-qualified his teammate Buemi 12-2. Median qualifying delta 0.134 seconds. Let's see, where are we? Average starting position 8.7 for Fines, and for Buemi 13.8. So for Buemi, qualifying was a massive struggle this past season, and really hindered his abilities to really fight for podiums, high points paying finishes on a consistent basis. But average finishing position 9.5 for Fines, so going backwards in the race. So while qualifying was decent, races not so much for Fines, and for Buemi 10.1. So again, able to improve in the races, but again, starting so low, it's really hard to get good points finishes. At the end of the season, Fines won the points head-to-head battle, 66-53. For podiums, three for Fines and 2 for Buemi, and no wins for either of them. Points model score 0.53, which is 9th, so third closest teammate pairing in this season. Average power rankings very, very close between the two of them. 13.6 for Fines, which ranked 15th, and 13.2 for Buemi, which ranked 13th. So overall, thought Buemi was a little bit better, and that's probably because I usually bias my scores towards the races a little bit more and less towards qualifying. So of course, Buemi probably making up more positions in the races. That's perhaps why I ended up having him ahead at the end of the season. Points above expected, I was honestly expecting both of them to end up below 100 given how poor things went, I think, from an outside view. But for Fines, 88%, so again, not quite as much as you would expect. But for Buemi, 115%, so again, pretty good in the race, pretty poor in qualifying, kind of the opposite of Fines. So again, a lot of inconsistency there, not really, strong qualifying and strong race performance from any one individual driver. For McLaren, a tough year for McLaren, but they did get their first win in Formula E, so that's always a boost. There are two drivers, Sam Bird and Jake Hughes. Bird 13th in the championship, Hughes right behind him in 14th. And of course, for Bird, he missed 3 races because of his hand injury. So again, those races will not be included in here, but again, I've made note of it in the points section. Qualifying head-to-head, this is where Hughes again was on top 8-5. Median qualifying delta 0.116, so just over a tenth of a second. Average starting position 10.8 for Bird, 9.9 for Hughes. So again, Hughes the better qualifier, but again, when it came to the races, it was really the other way around, as the data will show. So average finishing position 10.0 for Bird, for Hughes 10.6. So Bird making progress in the races, Hughes kind of going backwards in the races. Points, the numbers will show they tied 48-48 at the end of the season, but of course for Hughes, one of those points came when Bird was injured. So really, when you're just comparing the two of them directly, 48-47. And then of course you had Taylor Barnard, who stepped in for Sam Bird, scoring 5 points. And again, perhaps he'll make his Formula E debut next season. Again, 1 podium for each of them, and for Bird, really making that 1 podium count with that win in Sao Paulo, whereas for Hughes, first podium of his career in Shanghai. Points model for the season, 0.21 in favor of Bird, which ranked 11th, so closest teammate gap in the field were the McLarens. Average power rankings 12.8 for Bird, for Hughes 14.2, and again, like I mentioned, so close. Again, it's only like 1 position difference, but for Bird it ranks 11th, and for Hughes ranks 19th. Yeah, we'll get through this. We're almost there. 100 for Bird, 102% for average, or for points above expected. For Hughes, 60%. So showing Bird a little bit above average in that metric, and for Hughes, again struggling, very, very similar to his first year, where he again really struggled with that points above expected score. Now, moving on to Maserati, from Gunther, good season, finished 8th in the championship. For the only rookie this season, Daruvula, definitely a struggle, ends up finishing 21st in a car that, while it did finish 8th in the team's championship, was probably a bit better than the McLaren and a bit better than the Envision, as Gunther showed. Qualifying head-to-head 13-3. At the end of the season, the median qualifying delta was 0.142, but those first 5 or 6 races were quite rough for Daruvula. He was being out-qualified by half a second, 0.6 of a second. It was really not good. But over the course of the season, it definitely improved. But the race data, I think, didn't improve, which is probably why Daruvula is getting let go at the end of the season. Yeah, probably won't be back for season 11. Average starting position for Gunther, 9.9. For Daruvula, 15.6, which was the lowest of any of the drivers in the top 8 teams by a substantial margin. Next lowest was Fenestras, 14.4. Average finishing position for Gunther, 8.3. For Daruvula, 15.4. So even though Daruvula driving a better car than any of the bottom 3 teams, you would expect him to be able to move up quite a bit. That's not really happening. That difference of 0.2 could easily just be explained by drivers DNFing and him just moving up a position by default. Points, massive gap here. 73 points for Gunther, 8 points for Daruvula. Again, basically absolute total domination in this respect for Gunther. 2 podiums over the season, and of course that win in Tokyo. Points model score, 3.74 in favor of Gunther, so almost two standard deviations. So again, you're looking at teammate, head to head, where the gap is bigger than over 90% of teammate pairings in Formula E history. And again, biggest gap this season by a substantial margin. The next biggest, of course, is Roland and Fenestras, which is the score is 2.91. So almost an entire half of standard deviation difference between the two of them. Average power rankings, 8.8 for Gunther, which ranked 7th, and for Daruvula, 17.4, which ranked 22nd and last amongst the full-time drivers. Points above expected, 106 for Gunther, which again, pretty good, and for Daruvula, pretty meager, 31%, which again, worst in the top 8 teams by a pretty big margin. Next worst driver would be Van Dorn and Fenestras at 52%. Now, moving into the bottom 3 teams, again, for these teams, some of these numbers are going to look weird, and I'll explain the points above expected, because you're looking at that and you're saying, what ticked him over 100%? He was awful this year. Again, I'll get to that in a bit. Now, starting with 9th with at Cupra, Muller, a revelation this year. He was fantastic, and again, all the stats generally back that up. Finished 12th in the championship in the 9th best car, pretty big achievement there. Won the qualifying head-to-head against his very experienced teammate Lucas di Grassi, 10-4. Median qualifying delta 0.129 seconds. Average starting position 11.7. For di Grassi 16.5. So again, average of 5 positions difference. Average finishing position 10.3 for Muller, for di Grassi 13.3. So again, really big difference there. And Muller, despite driving such a bad car, was able to move up was actually able to move up despite the fact that his car was not that good efficiency-wise. Ends up with 52 points, which is the best amongst the bottom 6 teams by a big margin, and again, beat quite a few of the drivers with faster cars. No podiums, no wins, that's okay. Again, the car was pretty bad. Points model score 2.09, third biggest gap of the season again for di Grassi. I really wonder what his Formula E future holds there. Average power rankings, 9.9 for Muller, for di Grassi, 13.6, which ranked 16th. And again, honestly, that 9th overall is a bit low. But again, just because of how I do it, I'm not surprised that it ends up coming out in that way. But points above expected, Muller does fantastically here, 228%, which I think is the highest number on the board. For di Grassi, 34%, but again, not a complete disaster, I would say, because I think for the bottom 3 teams where points are a lot more of a lottery than they are with the higher running teams, it means that the points above expected can in some ways be looked at, well, it can also be skill, but there's also a lot of luck involved with some of these numbers, just because you can get one fluke result, and that can basically take you from being about 75% for that score to being 125% with just one really good result. Moving on to Mahindra, Mortara 16th in the championship, De Vries 18th. Again, the drivers I don't think were the problem. I think the car really held them back. But for Mortara, won the qualifying head-to-head 8-6, median qualifying delta 0.069 seconds. Average starting position 4.5 for Mortara, De Vries 15.8. So I really felt like for Mortara, for De Vries, again, a tough learning curve coming in with the new season 10 Gen 3 era regulations. Of course, he didn't drive last year. The only other driver who didn't was, of course, Deruvula. So again, I think there was a bit of a learning curve, and especially in qualifying, you could see that De Vries was improving quite a bit towards the end of the season. So again, in qualifying next year, I would expect De Vries to be much more competitive. Average finishing position 10.8 for Mortara, for De Vries 13.1, and for points, again, Mortara benefited quite a lot from that Berlin round where De Vries wasn't there. So just comparing rounds where they were both there, 22 for Mortara, 18 for De Vries. But again, 7 extra points for Mortara at that round in Berlin. So then it becomes 29-18. So a bit of a bigger gap. No podiums, no wins. Point water score 1.06, which was 7th. Average power ranking 11.5 for Mortara, 10th, 14.1 for De Vries, which was 18th. And then points above expected, 103 for Mortara, and for De Vries 143. Bit surprised De Vries was over 100%, but because of that, that really good race I had, and I believe the first race in London where he came 4th, I think that massively boosted his total from 6 points to 18. And again, like what I said about how sometimes luck can influence that last statistic with lower running teams, I think that had a lot to do with why De Vries was so far above 100%. Now, last but not least, I guess least in terms of speed, that's for sure. But we have ERT, we got Tictum and Steadicamera. A bit of a strange one. Tictum technically is ridden ahead here, finished ahead in the championship, 12 points to 11. Tictum 19th in the championship. Steadicamera 21st, but really there was one real fluke result for Tictum. Pretty much every other statistic suggests that Steadicamera was the better driver. Qualifying head-to-head 9-7 in favor of Steadicamera. Median qualifying delta 0.109 seconds, but for Tictum, started this season incredibly poorly and then got a lot better as the season went along. Average starting position 16.6 for Tictum, which was the lowest on the grid, just slightly behind Degrassi, slightly behind De Vries and Deruvula. Average finishing position 15.7, which again was worst on the grid, but for Steadicamera, starting position 13.8, finishing position 13.3. Points 12 for Tictum, 11 for Steadicamera. A bit unlucky for Steadicamera not to finish ahead in the points. I think he probably deserved a couple more races finishing in the points, but alas, wasn't to be. Yeah, of course, no podiums, no wins. Point model score exactly 1, which was 8th. So again, relatively close, all things considered. And that is, of course, in favor of Steadicamera, actually. So not in favor of Tictum, but in favor of Steadicamera. Average power ranking 17.0 for Tictum, Steadicamera 13.1. So I did think Steadicamera was the better driver over the season. Tictum 21st, so again, second last, only ahead of Tictum, only ahead of Deruvula. And for Steadicamera 12th, so again, about average. So again, pretty good amongst the bottom 3 teams. Again, last stat, 115% for points above expected for Tictum, and for Steadicamera 58%. So Steadicamera, for whatever reason, not able to get as many points as you would expect. Starting in really high grid positions, similar to John-Eric Byrne. So again, when you have a big disparity between those two things, again, that can kind of make it very difficult to get above 100%. And for Tictum, I think, of course, really lucky to get that 1/4 place finish in Misano. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten any points this season. So, given that the video is at 21 minutes, I have another board to do. I'm going to hold off on doing the other board, do that tomorrow, and we'll do that as separate videos. We'll do analysis of drivers, and then we'll do analysis of teams as well. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. There's my Season 10 Formula E review of the drivers. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.